Hi, welcome to MediatorPodcast.com, a podcast and video series about mediation, negotiation, and collaboration. My name is Melissa Gragg, and I provide online valuation, divorce, and mediation services in St. Louis, Missouri. Today, we're going to discuss an important topic, divorce, mediation, and grief, and why healing is important with Karen Millon. Karen is the founder of Healin, Healin with no G. She's an experienced entrepreneur in the healthcare space. She is a transformational coach. She's also host of the Healin podcast and author of An Amazing Divorce. Welcome, Karen. How are you?
Welcome, Melissa. Thank you so much for having me.
Now, you have a very interesting story, but you also kind of led you into providing services for people that are really healing in some capacity from divorce. So why don't you tell us a little bit of how you got into this space of healing after divorce?
Thank you. So in 2013, I separated from my marriage of 17 years. And how did I get into healing? Well, I'm the daughter of a therapist who told me that I needed therapy all through my 20s. And I thought she was delusional. I'm like, me, therapy? I got straight A's. I got accepted into the best business school in Canada, in investment banking. I have a great fiance. I don't need therapy. So I needed therapy. And so I got married. I knew I wasn't happy. I knew it wasn't the right thing, but I truly felt that I was as good as it got. Deep inside, I knew that I felt that I wasn't good enough, that I couldn't get good enough. My ex-husband, I met in business school. He has 3 masters. He has a great family. He's good looking. He's he's accomplished. He had a whole career in politics. We had a lot in common. We had a lot of vision. Our vision was in common, but we were incredibly different. So I thought that was as good as it gets. I get married. We didn't have kids for 7 years. And the minute we had children, all of my values changed. My, reality changed. Who I was changed. And we started having problems. And I realized that I wasn't happy, that I wasn't heard, I wasn't seen, I wasn't prioritized. And I went into therapy. So I went into counseling, talk therapy, where I started to realize that I wasn't happy, realize what I needed. And I found it extremely helpful to have someone, and I highly recommend it to anyone, that just an objective source that you can express and not repress, and just dialogue. And it does help you bring the subconscious to the conscious. But I was still stuck. I was still unempowered. I still didn't feel like I could leave or I could do better. I had also started a business with my brother that was a lot of work and extremely successful. So I didn't want to leave it because it was financially and operationally very rewarding, but it was a difficult situation because of my childhood and working with family. So I was stuck. I was incredibly unhappy. I think I cried myself to sleep for about 3 years. Then 2 little kids and the mess and it's a chaos. And I hit a point that came out of the blue without planning when I realized that I was done. I was on a business meeting, Melissa, on a conference in Chicago, and I had never in my life strayed or cheated, because God knows who has the time or effort. And I met someone that made me realize that there was someone out there for me that had everything in common. And I had worked in male-dominated fields for my entire career, and I had never met anyone like this. And I think it was the therapy before that allowed me to see what I deserved, what I wanted. I started to formulate lists of I want someone who spends the weekends this way, spends their money this way, spends their time this way. And I came home the very next day and called my marriage of 17 years quit.
Mm.
With all honesty, I told my ex-husband, I met this guy. It's never happened before. Not my type, not what I had ever envisioned, but we're done. And it was finally listening to my mother after 20 years that I started a therapy called EMDR, um, that addresses deep, deep healing. So it's not talk therapy. You don't go there to share your dirty laundry and about how unhappy you are this week. It's like deep, deep, deep therapy that I'm happy to talk to about. And I booked myself 2 sessions a week from the day of our separation, March 23rd. And the therapy and the deep healing, Melissa, led me to such a deep levels of rediscovery, of understanding why I married him, why I stayed for 17 years. It was a mirror on myself instead of being the victim that, oh, he didn't hear me. He was a narcissist. He bought all this art without telling me. He da da da. And all this anger and bitterness to like, wow, I was the one who decided to marry him. I was the one who decided to show up in the circus and keep seeing this and keep taking this. I was the one who put myself in the situation. And when I started healing those inner areas of myself that made me realize that I had married my father, that I had a childhood that had very neglectful, that I was very lonely, that I was never heard, I was never seen, and that I married the same thing. This led to such a loving, compassionate, empathetic understanding of me and my ex and how I showed up in the relationship as well, that I helped him, my ex, grieve. I helped him heal. I really pushed him toward therapy. I went to the efforts of finding a therapist for him in a different modality that was something that I felt he needed. And he started therapy, and Melissa, we both within a month decided to prioritize our children. He kept walking them to school together. He stayed in the house, I think, for about 3 months. We kept having dinners together. We just said, you know what? He came to me, even though I was the one who left him, and said, Karen, I let you down. I let my kids down. I take full responsibility of this, just through the therapy that he had gone through, to understand that I had been telling him this very clearly, that I wasn't happy, that I wasn't heard, that I wasn't seen. And we achieved an amazing divorce from day one, which was very shocking, and the premise of the book, where we were walking the kids together. He found a place literally 5 blocks away from me, like a 5-minute walk. We kept having dinners every Wednesday. We had a cottage property that we kept going to on weekends for about 2 years. I 6 months later started dating the man I left him for, and they became best friends. I then was in my 40s and decided to have a child because I was always wanted a third. This is something I wanted, my kids wanted, the guy I had met wanted. I'm like, listen, I'm 40. I pay all my bills. I'm okay with this. And I wasn't divorced yet. And I became pregnant. And my ex became the godfather of my child. And living in the snow, took the garbage out every day, took the kids to school so I didn't have to walk in the snow, and adores my child. He then allowed us to move to New York City, came every single weekend and stayed in our home, took our child out every Saturday morning so me and my husband could have a sexy morning on Saturday mornings, spent time together. And it was everyone who saw this around me, in my building, in my neighborhood, all the parents I was meeting that would meet my ex at a play date. And it's like, hey, is that your husband? No, that's my ex. But my husband might come to I don't know when he's coming home. And they're like, you got to write a book. This is crazy. And it was my focus through healing right after the divorce that achieved all this, that I then, through that healing, was able to leave my company and divest from that. And I said, I have to help others do this. This is incredible. A lot of my friends A lot of the people around me started getting divorced, and it was so sad and so traumatic. And these kids that I was actually a godmother to two, one became suicidal, calling me with the fighting and being in between and the nasty emails, that I was, inspired to write the book and then pursue coaching right away. Since about 2015, I started about a year of coaching everyone I knew for free, and realized that I loved it, that the significant changes that I was creating were life-changing, transformational stuff, and that I loved what I did, that there was nothing else I'd rather do. And so I've kept coaching, and I'm about to receive a certificate from the International Coaching Federation to help my clients identify all the areas of healing, help them heal if they haven't suffered anything traumatic, and then I personally set them up with the right deep healing modality. And then I use a 22 years experience in business to help them come up with a vision. Like, what is that ideal partner? What is that ideal career? What are your values? What are your drivers, your key differentiation? And how are you going to achieve all that? So they really focus on finding their blocks, healing those, and knowing what they want and going after it and just really finding their life. So that's how I got into a profession on helping others heal and transform their lives after divorce.
Well, and I think that, there are a lot of people out there that have gone through something in their life that has kind of led everything to change, right? And a lot of people, especially in the divorce arena, want to try to find a different way to get divorced because it does affect each of the individuals and it affects the children. But I think that, what people are sometimes missing is it is work, and it is sometimes hard work because it's introspection. And in some cases, I see a fair amount of divorces in my work. And I usually will tell people, like, no one's going to stay the same as when they were 18, 25, 35, 45, right? But normally a relationship that I see will usually stand the test of time. They're going to zig and zag together, right? So they're going to get healthy or they're going to get not healthy, right? They're going to do things together or they're going to start doing different things. And some of the conflict comes from that. Some of the conflict comes from communication issues or self-esteem issues. But the one that we're talking about today is really something that people don't necessarily understand unless they are either in the throes of divorce, usually not a great one, right? Or they're trying to figure out, like, why is this happening, right? But what comes up is very similar to grief. And I don't think people are ready for it, right? And so how do you think grief relates or comes into the divorce process? And why do you think that there's so much alike? There's so much about losing, like, it's just divorce, right? It shouldn't be that big of a deal, because that's what people say to themselves.
Yes, so I personally think that grief is the start of the healing process. And divorce is trauma. Divorce has actually been categorized by the Substance Abuse and Mental Association in America as trauma. It is second to death. It is the death of your dreams, the death of your vision, the death of your identity. I mean, I wanted my divorce. I've been in therapy for 4 years of how unhappy I was, and I had to cry my eyes out for a year because I was Karen and Anthony, and it was Karen and Anthony, and we had a beautiful home, and we had cottages, and we had people invited every weekend for visits, and it was the death of my in-laws. I think I stayed married for 10 years because I loved my in-laws. They were my mom and dad. Mm-hmm. I was bedridden with placenta previa on my first pregnancy, and it was my father-in-law who came over, moved in with me, fed me 3 times a day, helped me to the bathroom. I mean, he was my dad. We yelled, we tickled, we hugged, we screamed. Like, it was such a loss of tradition, a loss of Christmas, of Thanksgiving, of everything you knew. And I think that we don't treat divorce as such. We don't treat it as a death. The minute that we are left, or we decide to leave, or someone's having an affair and they get caught, and everyone puts their boxing gloves on and start fighting. And who's keeping the house, and who's keeping the kids, and who's keeping the cottage, and who's keeping the car, and who, and the funds, and the money, and the valuation, and the when it's really, you are at the worst time of your life, and you're grieving a massive loss. And I see it again and again with a lot of my clients. I have had clients who come to me 4 years after, and they are divorced, and they're dating 4 people who they realize is the same husband, just a different face, or the same wife, a different face. And when I asked them if they grieve, they never did. Some of them were so excited to get divorced. They threw a party right after. They painted the house. They moved the furniture. They had a really good time and didn't go through the grieving process. So some of the things that I help them do is to go through that process, because we all need to grieve. We all need tears. We hate to cry, but flowers need water to grow. And it's better outside than inside your body. There's a lot of research now to say that, trauma is not a memory. Trauma is a feeling. Trauma is a reaction you have in your body when your ex calls you or texts you, and you feel that agitation. It's in your body. There's a lot of research that unresolved trauma, unresolved tears are behind cancer, heart disease, obesity. It's important to honor the grieving process. So I have 3 chapters in my book on how I grieved, how I helped my ex grieve, my children. They didn't want to cry. They're like, "We're fine, Mom, we're fine." I'm like, "No, it's sad. That is moving out of our home. That's sad."
Well, and one thing that you said that I think is really important is that you wanted this, right? You wanted it for a long time. You went into therapy in order to get ready for it, to plan for it. And the reality is, what people would say or would think on the outside would be like, well, Karen, you wanted this. So why are you grieving when it's what you wanted? And I think that is a catch, right? That's a catch, is that we can want it and we can know that it's best for us, right? Maybe it's not a healthy relationship, or maybe it's even a toxic relationship, right? For you. But we can also be sad because it is different than what we thought. And I think that's where the key is. It's not that the person broke up with you and that you're so sad. It can be your choice. And it can still be the loss of what you thought it was going to look like at age 50, 60, 70, because we're seeing a lot of people that, we're calling them gray divorces, that have been married for even 30 or 40 years and are like, it hasn't been good for the past 5 or 10. I mean, think about it. People have been living this not great reality for that long. And so they're like, well, I've wanted it for so long. Why am I feeling like this? And I'll just ignore it. Right. And that's what we see people do, is that, we see people kind of skipping over this process. So why do you think that people do that? They skip it over it either pre-divorce or even like everything's done. And they should be like, all their friends are like, you should be so happy, right? Now you can go out, you can mingle. And they're still sad. And they're still mourning that loss, but they can't recognize it. So why do you think they just skip that healing process? Is it just that they didn't know, or is it hard?
Melissa, we are experts at repression. Freud said this many years ago, especially men, they're not allowed to cry. The minute they start crying when they're 4, 5, and 6, stop being a sissy, stop being a this, stop being a girl. Like, don't cry, don't cry. So many of us grew up with parents who, are you going to cry now? Is that what you're going to do? Are you crying now? Are you crying now? Like, we as a society, we're not allowed to cry. Crying is not something that you're proud about. That's not something that, for sure, at work, I always say, never cry at work, like
Right.
hold on your tears. So it's really, really hard. We are also masters at, no one wants to feel sad. No one wants to feel things. No one wants to introspect. We are masters at even knowing if we had a difficult childhood, or if something happened that wasn't ideal, or we were bullied, or our parents worked too much, or our parents were alcoholics, or we were raised by a single parent. And a lot of that made us who we are today. And so we think that was good for us, and it toughened us up, and we survived. But what helped us today is not going to help us going forward. And we carry it as a badge of honor. I used to be very aware that my father worked too much and had a disease that he doesn't remember my childhood very much. And so I told that. My ex knew that. I knew that, but I never felt that. I never felt how sad it was for me to go through that. I have clients who grew up with a single mother, male clients, who at the age of 10, they had to cook and clean and help and set up their own lunches and do it all. And then they go ahead and they marry someone that they're bringing in the income. They're extremely successful. They're cooking, they're cleaning, they're doing it all. And it's exhausting. And just because you've done it till you're 40 doesn't mean that it's what you should do, and that it really sucked for you, and that it was really hard for you. So we either carry it as a badge of honor, or we put Band-Aids on it. We medicate it, right? And there's good Band-Aids and bad Band-Aids. Good Band-Aids are alcohol, the most common one. I mean, I have a whole statue, like, we're having a hard time, we get divorced, let's drink. Some people do drugs or pot, or just to repress and not to feel. And believe it or not, a good Band-Aid is exercise and yoga and meditation, which are great for you and something I do almost every day, but they're still Band-Aids because they're not healing your issue. They're not going at the core of your anxiety, at the core of your sadness, at the core of your failure, at the core of your rejection. So they're all Band-Aids. But why do we skip it? Is because we've been extremely well trained to skip our pain, to not cry, to not feel. So the modalities that I did, like EMDR and all the modalities that I talk about on the podcast, are modalities that help you feel it so that you can heal it.
Well, and let's talk a little bit about that, because we've alluded to it a couple times, and it is something that maybe people aren't as aware of. So there are a few ways a person can heal from divorce besides like traditional, because everybody thinks of a therapist. You were raised by a therapist, so was I. So we're kind of like, therapy is part of life. But not everybody thinks that, right? They might think, oh, we got to go see a therapist, then it must be really bad. Like, this must be really bad. But I also think that one thing that we've seen a lot in divorce is self-esteem issues. And that's all yourself, right? Like, you can heal that. You can work on that. You're in control of that. That's you. Instead of saying, oh, I got to fix the world and other people, like, you kind of have to start with you. So tell us more about EMDR, because I know enough to be dangerous, but it is a very interesting and powerful modality for healing.
Yes. So as I started at the beginning, counseling and therapy is highly recommended, especially if you've never done anything to heal. As you know, telling our friends and family all that went on in our marriage and what they called us, and they called us a bitch once, we will forget that. They won't. And so I always recommend everyone just have someone objective to just vent with. There's also the birth of a lot of communities out there that for $9, $40, you join and you vent, and it's safe. But healing is going at the root of the problem so that they never trigger you, they never bother you again. And that's hard. And so what happens is that you're absolutely right. If you're someone like us who did not experience trauma is we did not go to war. We did not have a car accident. Our uncle or priest didn't sexually violate us. We weren't We didn't grow up in a very abusive home. We weren't beat up. We weren't, we didn't lose a parent to death or incarceration, though a lot of people have. Growing up with a single mother is trauma. But what has come to light lately with a lot of research and the ACE study, the Adverse Childhood Experiences study, is that neglect is trauma, that emotional neglect is trauma, and that when you go through something in your entire childhood where you suffer the same emotional neglect, is trauma, and it affects your beliefs and the meaning you gave your life and who you are to the core. And that's the bottom of self-esteem that you see in marriage. So being wealthy, and I went to private school and having a good life, but if your parents worked too much and they weren't there for you, and they showed up at 7 p.m. every night to kiss you quickly and then go back to work, or they work on weekends, or they were at home moms. I have clients who had at home moms but had a tea golf time at 7 a.m. and they were 9 years old making their own lunch and walking themselves to school because the mom had a golf game, or they play tennis too much. I have clients whose mothers had amazing social life, but they didn't spend time with them. That affect us to the core. So all children, and you have 4 kids, I have 3, know that they need affection, a lot of affection. They need attention, a lot of attention, and they need acknowledgement. It's exhausting. And the more you give it, the more they want. But that's who they are. And so when we grow up and we see our parents on their phone all the time or working all the time. So my mother was a therapist. She was also a professor at the local university. So she not only worked all day, but she had to mark exams all day. And on the weekend, I saw kids coming to my house fighting for marks and lineups on tests, and she was always working. My parents never played with me, ever, never came to see any of my softball games. I was home with 3 nannies who were not my nannies. They were the cook, the cleaner, the chauffeur. I was lonely, alone, on my own till 7 every day at the hands of an older brother who bullied me. And when that happens to you, or I've had clients who are the 4th born and they get all the hand-me-downs and all the worn out t-shirts and the worn out shirts and the no parties and no activities. And, I've done it 3 times. Why the heck am I going to do it? You know how that's like. Why are we going to do it again? And have stories to me that being bullied by their older siblings that never played with them, always exclude them, get out of my room, you're a pest, you're annoying. That is enough to traumatize you for life and make you feel that you're not lovable, that you're not good enough, that you're not worthy of love. And then, believe it or not, we find partners who will repeat the same pattern where we're not loved, we're not seen, we're not heard, we're not lovable. And then we're stuck in relationships like I was, because I didn't feel like I was good enough. Mm-hmm. Despite my education, despite my income, despite the fact that people look at me and say I'm beautiful, I didn't feel beautiful. I had a brother, Melissa, who told me I was butt ugly every day of my life, who called me names. I had a mother who told me I was ugly and told me, don't worry, the luck of the pretty ones, the ugly ones desire, and was talking to me about plastic surgery. And so I'm 45, and 5 years ago, my new husband of 8 years now, was like, you're beautiful. I'm like, what? Who are you talking about? Like, because this stuff, despite of your wealth, despite of your great childhood, every client I have, Melissa, when I ask them about their childhood, they all start by telling me that they had a great childhood. Mm-hmm. Why? Because they went on vacations, because they had jet streams, because they had the sailboat, because they had... That doesn't matter. When you are 40 years old and you can't ask for a raise, you can't charge what you're worth, you can't leave your wife, you can't leave your husband, you're not heard, you're not seen. You don't have to have experienced trauma and sexual abuse and being beat up to be living a life with negative beliefs. And these are the negative beliefs that make us date the wrong person, marry the wrong person, stay with the wrong person, not be the parents we want to be. So what EMDR does, that's a long way to tell you, EMDR is a technique that was developed 30 years ago by Francine Shapiro here in New York City, who has been tremendously validated with research to work over 70% of the time. And it works to address those negative beliefs that we form. So when you go to therapy, you might have 1 or 2 sessions where you share your history, but it's not a place. Men love EMDR, and it's the tool that is mostly used for veterans for PTSD, because you can have a very successful session without talking too much or sharing it all. So what happens is EMDR stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. And what she found on her research is that, like we said, we are experts at repression. And you can understand just by understanding in the right side of your brain and cognitively that you were abused, or that you grew up with alcoholic parents, or that your dad was schizophrenic, or that, and that, that you're screwed up for that, messed up, you're stuck.
Right.
Has nothing to do with healing. So what happens is that when you are bilaterally stimulated, so they make you follow their fingers, or they put tappers on your legs and you feel like 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Or when you're doing it in Zoom, which is highly effective, you hug yourself and you do butterfly taps. For some reason, that bilateral stimulation allows you to access the emotional part of your brain. And it allows you to start seeing this thing and feeling the feeling. So I can tell everybody, well, my dad worked too much, and I remember him coming home at 7, 8 and going straight to bed. And I remember my weekends also, he slept, and we went to the country club, but he was doing his own thing. He never swam with me, he never played. But when you access the emotional side of your brain, you don't see it, you start feeling it. And you start feeling how sad it was and how lonely you felt. And you start feeling the anger when I called my mom at work to complain that my brother was bullying me and she wouldn't do anything about it. And she blamed me for it when I was 5 years younger. Oh, what did you do to bother him? I'm like, excuse me? And so you access that, and that makes you cry, and that makes you feel the pain. And the minute that you start seeing what you went through, that made you strong and made you achieve and made you go to law school, and made you go to business school, and made you become an amazing entrepreneur. That sucked, and that was hard, and that was painful. And you cry and you feel it. You let it go. It's over. You're not 7 anymore. You're not 8 anymore. You're not. And so the desensitization is doing that exercise where you now separate yourself. And it's like, okay, Karen, you're 45 years old now. You're not living with your brother. He's not there anymore. He's not there to take your breakfast and to take the remote control and to hit you in the head. What would you tell that 7-year-old? How would you parent her? How would you alleviate her? How would you? And I talk to that inner child, and you heal. So it works 70% of the time. It's amazing, Melissa. I've done treatments, which is my sense of I'm not good enough. When I met my husband now, he is amazing. He adores me. He listens to me. He respects me. He makes me feel like I tell my parents and my ex-in-laws, which are still my in-laws, that I have never felt loved the way I have felt the last 7 years with this man. But because I suffered with not feeling like I was worthy of it.
Right.
Or I was always stressed that he was going to die, or he was going to get sick, or he was like the next shoe is going to drop. Like I was not used to happiness and peace and being heard and loved. And so I did a lot of EMDR for that. And then for the past 3 years, I'm like, I deserve this. This is awesome. I am worthy. But I've done simple EMDRs with the fact, one of my first EMDRs, I started really with the easy stuff. I used to be a clown and make fun of people at a party, or like throw people under the bus for a joke. And people knew me for that, except some of my close friends were like, Karen, I told you my boyfriend had a big thing and I didn't want you to say it. And I did an EMDR, and oh my God, it just brought me back to this private school where I wasn't the prettiest, I wasn't the wealthiest, I wasn't the smartest. And I had to become the clown to survive. and to throw people under the bus and to be the cause of laughter. And when I went back and I'm like, I am 35 years old, this was 10 years ago. And I don't need to do that. I am worthy. I am wealthy. I am pretty. I don't need to do that. Oh my God, Melissa, all of my friends that have known me from childhood or from college or from high school that get together with me 10 years ago, the day after EMDR, now they're like, aren't you going to throw a joke? Aren't you going to say something vulgar? Aren't you going to make it? And I'm like, oh, like, it's not me.
Mm-hmm.
And now my sister throws these jokes and I'm like, oh, that's vulgar. And I'm like, she's like, I learned it from you. And I'm like, but we go through life doing things we don't want to do, hurting people, hurting our children because of our childhood. And things like EMDR work great. Now, other modalities that get deep and achieve the same thing as EMDR are hypnosis. I would always, and I always recommend my clients to do EMDR first because it's hard, but it's level 1. I had things that I was facing that EMDR didn't help me with. After 3 sessions, I have a fear of, I moved to Manhattan. And with COVID, there's a lot of homeless people. I never liked the subway. I have a fear of whatever. I would start stressing, sweating. I don't go around on Times Square walking on my own. I'm afraid of homeless people. I'm afraid of crazy people. I'm afraid of, and that sounds terrible saying crazy people, but people with mental illness. And so I did EMDR on it. It didn't help. I still felt the exact same way. In Canada, which is the safest country in the world with 100 homicides a year, I still felt afraid.
Mm-hmm.
And I did a hypnosis because I had a guest at the podcast who talked about that when you cannot recall, is the pre-verbal stage of your life from 0 to 5. When you are, and I actually had a client, amazing story, where she felt unworthy and unwelcome. And we worked on it, and she had a great childhood, and we kept digging, and she wasn't the third child. She had a present mother. So when we can't remember what happened, it's all happening in the pre-verbal stage, which is a very big stage. And actually, the research now shows that trauma has the biggest imprint in the pre-verbal stage and in the baby stage. So let's not let our kids cry till, sit on a dirty diaper, and all that affects the sense of worth, of importance, of safety and security in a kid's life. So anyway, so hypnosis goes through the stuff you remember, so you can do it instead of EMDR, but you can bring up stuff that happened to you at 2. And so I had 2 clients, Melissa, one that had all this anxiety and hated noise and had a vision of her father freaking out at her, screaming and beating her up at 2 because she woke him up from a nap. And after that, she lost her voice. She has no opinions. She was this little woman who married this guy and had no voice. And she's like, I can't speak up. And she realized that it was from that. How traumatizing. That incident that happened when she was 2, her dad was drunk. I'm sure he regrets that moment every day of his life. And what we do is not about blaming our parents. We all try the best we can. We are parents and we still make mistakes. I do. So it's like, right. But no one got handed here's how to parent and here's how to raise emotionally stable children. But that traumatized her. So I had another client that did hypnosis. She didn't understand why the sense of worth, the self-esteem that you're talking about. Her mom had postnatal depression when she was born. That came up in the hypnosis. And she was not wanted. She was not held. She was not breastfed. She was not grabbed. And all she heard was screaming and fighting because the father didn't know what was happening. He wanted to leave his mom because he's like, what kind of a woman's not holding their baby? Poor woman had postnatal depression, got treated, became a great mother. They never told her because why are you going to tell your kids something that they don't remember?
Right.
And they remember everything and it gets imprinted in our body. So another form of therapy is somatic experiencing, that goes after our body and how we hold that trauma and where we hold that trauma. And when we have back pain, when we have stomach pains, when we have arm pains, and it helps us process. And EMDR does a lot of somatic experiencing. And then if you want to go any deeper, and if you have had trauma, I have an episode on the podcast for a woman who got sexually molested by her father and had horrific trauma. So if you were beat, if you had a car accident, and you are open-minded and brave, and that's not me, and I don't recommend it, but it's the last resort that works. It's the whole world of psychedelics that are illegal in the states except Oregon, and that the guest I had practices in the Netherlands where it's legal, and it's extremely researched and ran by professional psychologists. But I had a guest on the podcast that went to Ecuador and Puerto Rico and Costa Rica and Colombia, and they do this psychedelic rituals with priests. So if we have clients who have experimented with pot or drugs or light drugs, I have a client who did them in college and she felt safe working with that. So I put her with a professional. They give you MDMA, which is a source of ecstasies, and there's mushrooms, and there's episodes that explain how they work and when to do them and when not to do them and who to do them with. But they inject dopamine in your body. It's not an injection, it's a pill, where you can access what happened to you that was horrific and traumatic, like your father violating you or an uncle or something. And you can see it in a safe environment, feeling love, feeling happy, and allows you to get there where you get there with EMDR, where you feel sad and you can cry and process what happened to you and reprocess it and love that inner child and hug it. And you're safe now. This person is not here to hurt you. You're 30 something years old. You have survived, and you don't get re-traumatized and you don't feel the fear again, because that is what's very delicate. And that's why you have to work with a professional. Whenever I have a client who has suffered big T trauma, I don't touch it with a 5-foot pole, because by talking about it,
right,
if you don't have a safety protocol and if you're not with a professional, you can get re-traumatized, and that can screw you. I mean, I had a hypnosis session to heal my walking in the street. And I was so afraid I was going to see something terrible that had happened to me at 2 or 1 or 3, because my fear is so strong that I'm like, this is ridiculous. Like, I'm in New York City. I should be able to walk around and not sweat. And it was my brother again. I saw that memory of him pestering me and hitting me in the head immediately, and all the stuff that I went through. Thank God, no, nothing traumatic, but, just being bullied by your brother,
right.
which happens in every household. We all minimize it. Oh, everyone got bullied, or being bullied at school, or a teacher with one incident is enough to traumatize you for life. Being told that you're not good enough you didn't make it to the audition, or you didn't make it to the team, can be a whole cross you're carrying that affects your marriage, affect who you married, affect how you stand up for yourself. So that's how I work. I work at uncovering all the negative limiting beliefs, all the stuff that happens to us that we don't think is a big deal, but that kept us stuck, and it kept us in a very unhappy place. And I got trained on helping you process that, as long as it's not big tick trauma, and understand what happened to you, and understand that you're old to, that you don't have to carry that for the rest of your life, so that you can be in that amazing relationship again, so that you can have a great divorce, so that you can go after your dreams professionally. And if not, I match you with the right therapist based on your needs. If you're are braver than I am and want to jump into hypnosis right away, or that's something you've done, I have hypnotherapists that do it through meditation. So if you're very good at meditation, that might be the right solution for you. If you're a bit more You want validated research. EMDR is great for you.
Well, and I think that, during the divorce process, when they either at the beginning, the middle, the end, it doesn't really matter. There is so much going on that you're questioning, right? So you're already questioning, is this the right decision? How is this going to look for myself? How's this going to look for my kids? How are we going to tell people? Like, is anybody going to still be friends with us? Are we going to lose our friends? Are we going to lose our family? Like you go through all of that stuff that you would not think that there would be something that would be further back than that, the trauma of the divorce or the trauma even of the marriage. Some marriages are not really very healthy, for a long period of time. And so you're going through all of this and it just becomes this waffling back and forth of like, well, maybe because I'm feeling all of this, maybe it's a bad decision. Maybe we should stay together, right? And I think that is the harder part for somebody, because then they're just like, well, I'm having all these feelings. Am I making a good decision? Am I making a bad decision? When the reality is you may have to go back, because in some aspects, all of this is a symptom. So this relationship didn't work. It could be a symptom of something else, and yes, we're not perfect people, but I think we have this hesitation to look in, right? When we're through this, because it's like, well, no, I've been the innocent victim here. I've been dealing with this narcissist, or I've been dealing with this, verbal abuse for this long. Like, I didn't do anything. And you have people that are out there saying, no, you didn't do anything wrong. Like, you're okay. Like you're the good one. He's the bad one, or vice versa, right? She's the horrible one. You're perfect. And this is saying, okay, if all of that is happening in some capacity, looking back and saying, well, if I'm going to clear it all out, we might as well go way back. Because I think sometimes, and when I say self-esteem, it's really just not feeling enough,
Yeah.
in some respect. And people say, well, I don't have low self-esteem. Well, that's not really what we're talking about. We're talking about, this starts to rock when you made a big decision to get married and it is no longer successful, so now you have to part. It makes you feel that you were unsuccessful. And now you're taking not feeling worthy, and now you're not even successful, right? And all of those layered things are really what we're talking about in healing. Is it's not like, okay, how do you heal to go find somebody else and get married? It's how do you heal? Because this is the sign. The sign that something is going wrong is because this is falling apart. Why? Is sometimes people are like, well, I know why they cheated on me. I know why they're an alcoholic, right? It's always they. Whereas this is a little different. And I mean, I kid you not, this is probably the first podcast that I've literally sat back and like in awe, like listened to you, because it is saying things that we understand but are just completely different. It's not what we're used to, So like, let's go get divorce counseling. Let's go get marriage counseling. But this is really saying, that we need to take a change by ourselves, right? And I think that, one final question that we'll kind of address, and then we'll talk about some of your services, but, do both parties need to take steps towards healing in the divorce? Is it mandatory that you do this with anybody else? And I think the answer is no. But I think that that's harder for people to make that decision and to do that. And what we're encouraging in this process and this discussion is that it really is an individualized journey. And the path to healing is not predicated on anybody else. It's based on your desire to heal, essentially.
You got it. Yes. I mean, in an ideal world, world and to have a truly amazing divorce like I did. I did a lot, but it takes two to tango. And I feel blessed that my ex took the time to dig deep and address his issues and come to the table in a different way. So that was ideal, I think. But in reality, it's very, very hard to get men to go to therapy. I have a whole episode on why it's so hard for men to heal. And we talked about the fact that historically, they weren't allowed to cry or feel or talk.
Mm-hmm.
So but I think that, and I've seen it with my clients when they heal on their own, and just exactly what you said, that yes, maybe we were dealing with a narcissist or an alcoholic or someone addicted to porno, which is very common now. Myself and the clients that I work with that heal on their own, just like you said, it brings so much clarity that despite the fact that in many cases it's true, like we were dealing with a narcissist, we're dealing with an alcoholic or someone who's addicted to golf and all the sports and everything takes priority over us, we are still powerful and we are still making choices, and we're the ones who are staying there and not having a voice to defend ourselves. I sometimes think that if I felt good enough to, like I do now, to stand up and say, I am not putting up with this anymore, maybe I would be together with my ex. If I had said that enough way before I fell out of love, way before I was already out. So healing on your own is highly recommended and is enough to cause a massive difference in your marriage, especially if it's high conflict, to guard your children, and to be the person that you want to be, and to empower yourself
Well,
to
and
professionally and in the next relationship. Because what I have clients who come to me is like, should I stay or should I go? Like, the purpose is not to get divorced, because you're going to go from a very unhappy situation right now, but with double the wealth, double the friends, double the support system, to a different situation where you are going to be, if you are not geared to really transform your life and reinvent yourself and be happy, you are going to go from a bad situation to an even worse situation.
mm-hmm.
And if you're going to stay, I had clients who were miserable for 7 years divorce, and that's what their children saw: tears, grumpiness, yelling at them because she's not happy. If you want to get divorced, and it's your choice, like it was my choice, is to do it for the better, to do it with consciousness, to being like, I am going to show my children what happiness is.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to show my children what a healthy, loving, amazing marriage looks like, mm-hmm. and behaves like, and treats each other like. Mm-hmm. I am going to get my career by the horns, and I'm going to follow my dreams. And that's what working with me is focused on.
Yeah, and let's tell people a little bit more about that, because I've been enthralled, and I think Oprah or somebody probably pretty amazing said you teach people how to treat you. And so you show people how to treat yourself. And that is hard for people to understand sometimes, because they're like, no, you did that. You did that. You did that to me. You did that, but you allowed it, So I think there is a lot of growth. We will typically see in divorce that women will plan far ahead, years ahead, and not even planning, but it's sort of just emotionally preparing to make that decision, or trying to find the right time to tell them, right? And because they don't know if they're going to be mad, they don't know if they're going to take all the money away, and hide things and play dirty or not. They certainly usually know that spouse has a propensity to play dirty, so it's probably smart of their thinking. But I think that they're, if you're having some of those issues that you don't even think you have the capacity to do that, when they come to me, I'm sort of like, okay, okay, so we haven't really told them yet. Okay, we haven't really done this yet. So I think in that capacity, women, and then sometimes I think even working on yourself maybe could change some of the marriage. Again, it doesn't mean that it can fix it, right? But when two people have changed and two people have gone this way instead of like changing together where you're kind of weaving in, you're either coming back together and say, yeah, we want to do this again, or you're coming back and saying, it's not successful for me. Is it successful for you? And you do have two different stories. Like you could have a woman that's like, I've been unhappy for 5 years. And you have a man that's like, I thought everything was fine. Again, they're both seeing the reality that they want to see. But I think all of what we've talked about today, it's about taking that control back into your own hands, your healing, your trauma, your life. Will only change if you want to delve into that side. If you just want to be okay with how you're doing, but it's not working for you, but you're okay with it, that's fine too. But tell them how, because you kind of help them through the path. And it's through some of these things that you've talked about. But also, I mean, literally, like I could probably just listen in to you talk for like 10 hours. And I was like, yeah, I need to do some of that too with my oh yeah, I need to do some,
We all do. I have a coach and I have a therapist, and I have an EMDR practitioner and a hypnosis, that when I feel that I'm stuck or I'm having a hard time making a decision, I have coaches I pay, and you go. So the way I work is in a holistic way, at least 4 sessions, at least a month. And we do start, the initial session is, who are you and what are your goals? And where do you see yourself? What are your visions? What are your values? Because this is going to help you make decisions that are in line with your values, in line with the things that you really care about. So I do give you a list of 100 values, and I ask you to list the top 9. It's really hard. We look at your wheel of life, and a lot of us is like, financially great, family great, emotionally, personally, big 0. So how's that right looking? Big bomb every time, boom, boom. Let's look at your life. How are we going to transform your life? What is missing? Your friendships, your health, your body. A lot of divorced women, or men, gain a lot of weight. They're like, I have a client who hadn't had sex for 15 years. And I'm like, is that something you want to get back on the horse? When they say, absolutely. So, okay, let's look at your health, emotional, financial. So that's the first session. And then usually with divorced women, we are, like you said, when are we telling the kids? How am I dealing with my friends, the in-laws, the house? I have a mediation meeting tomorrow. Do I really want the second home? Do I really want that? Or am I just mad and I want to spite him? How do I feel about him introducing a new girlfriend? So a lot of the times in my experience, the sessions, I help you with whatever's bothering you today or this week. And as I told you before our session, a lot of them are parenting. So for example, one client last week was like, I just freaked out at my 2 teenage boys. I scream at them so badly. I feel terrible. I lost my marbles. I don't want to do that again. I feel bad. I'm like, so what happened? They hadn't done the dishes. So when you go to the kitchen and you see that the dishes are not done, what are your thoughts? What thoughts come to mind? What's your belief? And she starts, they don't respect me. They take me for granted. They don't know how hard I'm working. And if you feel that they don't respect you, that they don't want you, that they don't take you, that they take you for granted, how do you feel? I'm pissed off. I'm angry. And if you're angry, what do? I scream my eyes out. I insult them. I called them names. I lost my marbles. And then what happens? They haven't talked to me for 2 days. They're super mad. How's that working out for you? Terrible, right? So let's talk about that thought and that belief. When was the last time you felt that way? When was the first time you felt that way? And that was my ex-husband who took me for granted, who I worked and didn't value my work because I made 50,000 less than he did. So therefore I had to do the dishes. I had to make up for what I didn't make, who treated me poorly. So this woman had been yelling at their sons when she really wants to yell at her ex-husband. And then we look deeper. and we look at her dad and her mom and where are those thoughts coming from? And then we look at, in all reality, now that we looked at that, how do your children really feel about you? Oh, they love me. They don't disrespect me. They're not taking my work for granted. They're kids who want to play Roblox instead, period. Right? And it's like an aha moment, like, holy cow, like I was so mad at them. Like I yelled so hard, like, you know what I mean?
Right.
Another client last week was like, she was beside herself because her ex-husband introduced the new girlfriend to the kids and went to the school to pick up the kids. And I can't believe, and we had it on our agreement that he had to wait 6 months. And she was like ringing my ear. Like, I'm like, okay, calm down. What's the thought and the belief behind that? That my kids are going to like her better, that I'm going to be replaced, that people are going to think I'm a moron and he's moving on and I'm not moving on. If you feel that, how do you react? Well, I sent him a nasty email. I called the mediator. I got the mediators involved. I got the lawyer involved. Like, how's that working out? Oh, it's going to cost me $2,000 because I got everyone involved. And, now I sent him another nasty email this week. And so every issue, I'm afraid of telling the kids. What's the thought? What's the belief? They're going to think I'm a failure. So we always go back to the negative belief, to our childhood, where that came from. I help you understand that that's not what's happening today. But unless we don't look at the root of how we behave and the things we do and the things we don't want to do, we're going to keep acting like that 7-year-old body and that 6-year-old, reacting with the same anger and the same response, despite the fact that we're 60 or 50 or so. My job is to bring awareness to you, to help you see and understand why you do the things you do and why, and obviously get you to see it differently. So my clients are extremely happy and they're like, I have not yelled at the kids for a month. I understand that I'm being triggered for something else. I am not reacting to my ex anymore. I am reducing the conflict because I understand where this is coming from. And this is an area in me that I have to heal. And in many cases, this approach that I just took you through, like EMDR, also works 70% of the time, documented, researched. When we analyze our thoughts and we're able to change your thoughts, and then you understand, okay, so if you're understanding that your kids just want to play Roblox, they love you, they're so grateful for you, how do you feel? Oh, I'm grateful and happy. How do you react when there's a sink full of dishes? I am patient. I remind them with love to do the dishes when they can. I start giving them an incentive. Oh, whoever does them first gets, to choose dinner tonight. It changes you dramatically. With the clients that I had a client yesterday, a male, who was feeling that he wasn't spending enough time with his kids and that he wasn't a good enough dad because he loved his job. And we looked at his background, it came out that he was raised by a single mom and his dad missed out on him. He missed out on his mom, on his dad. He is trying to make sure his kids don't, and he's overcompensating to the point of overwhelming helicopter parenting, who kids don't appreciate either. And he's been divorced for 3 years, have not dated, have not exercised. It's all about being this father he never had. And when we looked at why is he a bad dad, it's like he's the best father I've ever heard. And I have a great dad. My husband's amazing, but he's still even better. But when I asked him, we did that exercise. It's like, what thought would you rather have? And he's like, that they have a great dad and that they're getting what they need. He wasn't able to really feel it, to then act differently and not feel guilty and not do what he does. So he is now next week working with a hypnotherapist. That was his choice, to heal that wound, because it will never be enough. If your dad was not there for you, you could be doing cartwheels. He could quit his job and become a full-time dad it will not be enough, because that hurt is so deep. So we are all driven. I have enough male clients who marry this toxic, unhappy women who were exact replication of their mother.
Well, and I like what you said, like, what's the thought? What's the belief? And when you're doing it, to try to understand, like, why, because there is a fascination that I have with, you'll have a very strict family, and then those kids will be like the other side and like let people do whatever, and then those kids will become strict parents because their parents like it's constant. We're doing something different because we didn't like it when we grew up.
Of those a week with the co-parenting.
Uh-huh.
You believe those kids are up till 10 and they're eating hot dogs and they're not, I'm here going to Whole Foods. I'm like, okay, I'm not the venting coach. I am very good at redirecting. Okay, these are the facts, the situation. Your kids are having a hamburger or hot dogs. Kids are not going to bed on time. What are the thoughts? How's that working out? It's like, and it works really well. But then he's digging really deep to see where that came from, what the beliefs were, what the meaning we gave to things. So that you cannot change that. This doesn't work if I don't get you to really understand the roots and get you to feel something. I mean, tears are always part of the session when you're like, wow, in order to see a shift.
Yeah, no,
it's very transformational stuff. It's not stuff that you got to be ready to do this work. A lot of my clients, we just take 6 months more and we reconvene. I get phone calls a year later. Okay, I'm ready. It's like, because it's deep stuff. I mean, there's always almost tears, because like you said at the beginning, we minimize what happened to us because what happened to us made us strong and made us the people who we are today, but that's no longer serving us. And we need to understand where that came from and heal it and feel it so that we can thrive. And that's my goal. My goal is not for you to get divorced. My goal is to be happy. And sometimes you find it inside your marriage, but you got to have a working participant. And that's always not the reality nor your concern. I mean, again, redirecting my partner, he's this, he's that, he needs to go to therapy. This is not about him.
Yeah.
This is about us. This is about you and I. This is about you.
Right. And I think that just going, and that's why I really like your way of dealing with it. I think that, if people have questions, they should definitely reach out to you. We've provided a bunch of different ways that they can reach. This is your website, healin.net. So no G. But I think it's a different, just trying to fit traditional therapy into this kind of chaos of divorce, which is layered on to, trauma and childhood issues. I think that it's really, if you feel like you're lost and that divorce is one issue of it, but it could just be a personal issue, I think even reaching out to somebody that's not in your area is also good, because some of us live in very tight communities, and you may want to be able to, and I love the other piece of advice that you said is, because there are things that are that happen in this passion, right? Doesn't make them right. I'm never saying that it makes it right, but it makes it happen, and maybe it would only happen once and then it won't happen again. But absolutely, if your family finds out about it, or your best friends or anything, like they're never going to live it down.
Never forget.
Never. And they're like your best. And I think that that's great. But I think that in the healing, I think you want to access a level of vulnerability and authenticity that allows you to be completely free. And so if that means reaching out to somebody who's in New York and who, is never going to share this information to somebody else, I think that that's powerful stuff, because some of this healing is deep, like you might not even want anybody to know about it, right? But you want to get through it, and you want to get over it, and you want to put it in the past. And those are very different things than, like, shouting it from the rooftops. this is kind of like, how do you progress as a human in some capacity, even through conflict, even through, adversarial conversations and things. So we really, really appreciate your information, Karen. And I hope people do reach out to you. And like, I mean, during this whole time, I'm like, I thought I was perfectly fine, but like, I feel like I need Karen.
We all do. I did. Like
Yeah.
I said, and I don't blame people for the 11 years, no, 15 years. I don't need therapy. I'm great. I had a working mother. My parents worked hard. Like,
Mm-hmm.
but when you feel stuck, or you feel that you're not where you want to be, or that you feel, it's good to look at these things, and we all need it.
Yeah.
There's very few people had a perfect childhood.
Right.
Despite of, I think this low level trauma, this neglect, and is the biggest equalizer. Despite of the color of your skin, your net worth, your social standing, we all, very few of us. And again, if it wasn't our parents, just a teacher, a football coach, a bully in school, is enough to cause our self-esteem issues.
Even to stop calling it trauma. Like if you're even triggered by the word trauma and you're like, oh no, I haven't gone through any of that. If there's something that happened in your past that you feel was important or an issue or hard or easy or whatever, that is the importance of it. It doesn't have to be important to anybody else. It could be frivolous to other people, but that event and that thing had importance in that moment, and you held on to it and you keep on going back to it. So, I mean, I think that this doesn't have to be something that's catastrophic, right? This is just, I'm repeating behaviors that are not helpful. How do I stop it? Right. And maybe everybody's like, we'll talk to somebody. And okay, but how does that, so this is a level deeper. This is really like, how do we get to the root of it? And I really, really love all of this so much. So please reach out to Karen. She has some amazing information. I know we're going to come up with another topic for her to come on again, because I was mesmerized. So I think you really have a great story, and you really put things into perspective that people can understand. So we appreciate you for being a guest today.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for what you're doing. You're an amazing host, and this vocation to take the extra effort and help your clients and help your community understand the complexities of mediation and divorce is something to be proud about. So thank you so much for what you do.
Well, now I think we all need to heal first, and then maybe it would be a lot easier. It really would. But thank you, Karen. We will talk to you soon.
Thank you.